I had been working the night shift for almost 2 years, patrolling the quiet streets of Pine Ridge, a small town tucked away in the middle of nowhere. The calls were usually routine, drunk drivers, noise complaints, the occasional domestic disturbance. But that night was different. It was around 3:30 a.m. when I got the call. Came through on the radio, crackling with static. Unit 15, possible 10 to 50, accident. At the old Thornton House on Maple Road. Proceed with caution. The Thornton House had been abandoned for over a decade. It was a place we all avoided, especially after dark. There were rumors, whispers about strange occurrences there. Lights flickering in windows that hadn't been open in years, footsteps echoing when no one was around, shadows moving behind the boarded-up windows. But it was just talk, right? I was the only unit in the area, and I knew I'd be first on the scene. As I drove out there, the air felt thick, heavier than usual. The kind of pressure that makes your skin crawl. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the stress of the job, the lack of sleep catching up with me. When I arrived at the Thornton House, the place looked untouched, like time itself had frozen. The house loomed like a silhouette against the dark sky, with its broken windows and overgrown yard. A soft wind rustled the trees, but otherwise, everything was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I stepped out of the car, my boots crunching on the gravel as I approached the front door. The smell hit me first, an overwhelming stench of decay, like something was rotting inside. I called out, "This is Officer James Cooper. Is anyone there?" My voice echoed through the empty air. No response. I cautiously pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. The hallway was pitch black. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness as I moved inside, the beams flickering with each step. The silence felt suffocating. As I reached the end of the hallway, I noticed something strange. A faint red glow coming from beneath the door at the far end. My heart started pounding, and against my better judgment, I walked toward it. The closer I got, the more that smell intensified. I was about to open the door when I heard it. A soft, dragging sound from behind me. Something moving. But I was alone. I turned around in a panic, my flashlight sweeping across the room, but saw nothing. I wasn't sure whether I had imagined it, but I felt watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I had to know what was behind that door. Against every instinct screaming at me to leave, I pushed the door open. The door creaked open slowly, almost as if something was holding it back. The red glow I had seen from the hallway intensified, but it wasn't warm, like fire. It was cold, unnatural. The room was dim, lit by a single, flickering bulb overhead that buzzed like a warning. And there, in the center of the room, was a figure. First, I thought it was a person. A man, maybe hunched over in a chair, facing away from me. His clothes were tattered, like he had been living in the house for days, maybe weeks. But something wasn't right. He was too still. His body was unnaturally rigid. I stepped closer, my hand instinctively reaching for my gun, but I didn't draw it. Not yet. The air grew heavier with each step I took, the scent of decay now mixed with something metallic, like blood. It was faint, but it was enough to make my stomach churn. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I had to find out. "Sir?" I called out, my voice cracking in the silence. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" No answer. The man didn't move, didn't even twitch. But I could hear something now, soft whispers, like voices, but they weren't words. They were low, unintelligible murmurs coming from the shadows. I spun around, my flashlight scanning every corner of the room, but there was nothing there. Nothing but the darkness pressing in. I tried again. "I'm a police officer. If you're in trouble, I can help." Still nothing. The only sound now was the buzzing of the light above me, and the whispers, growing louder, filling the space. My nerves were on edge. I reached the man in the chair and, without thinking, placed a hand on his shoulder. The moment I touched him, the room seemed to shift. The temperature dropped, and I could see my breath in the air. I jerked my hand back, startled, but it was too late. The man's head snapped around, his eyes wide open, but empty. No pupils, just blackness. His mouth opened wide, far too wide, as if his jaw had unhinged. "Leave," he rasped, the voice not human, not even close. It was guttural, like something scraping against stone. "Leave now." I stumbled back, my heart racing, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, trapped by the darkness, the whispers now louder, all around me. The man's head tilted back and forth, jerking unnaturally. I couldn't take my eyes off him, but I felt something else, something moving in the corner of my vision, a shadow that didn't belong. And then I saw it, a figure, tall and impossibly thin, standing in the doorway behind me. Its face was obscured by the darkness, but I could feel its eyes on me, like it was studying me, waiting. The whispers stopped, and for a moment, everything was silent. I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. The cold hand on my shoulder was like ice, sending a shockwave of panic straight through me. My body jolted, and I spun around faster than I've ever moved in my life, gun drawn, adrenaline pumping. But there was nothing behind me, no one, just the oppressive darkness closing in from every direction. The whispers returned, louder now, swirling around my ears, clawing at my mind. "Leave, leave, leave," they repeated, each voice distinct, yet layered, as if they were all saying it together. I tried to focus. I needed to keep my wits. I wasn't a rookie anymore. I had been through bad situations before, but this was something different. This felt wrong on a level I couldn't describe. The figure in the chair, the man with the black, empty eyes, was still there, staring at me with that same haunting gaze. His mouth didn't move, but I could hear the words in my mind now, clear as day. "She's coming for you." I couldn't tell if the words came from him or from the darkness itself. It didn't matter. The air felt thick, suffocating, and I could barely breathe, my chest tightening. My flashlight flickered, then went out completely, leaving me in pitch-black darkness. The only thing I could hear was my ragged breathing and the pounding of my heart in my ears. Then, from the corner of the room, I saw it. A figure emerging from the shadows, but it wasn't like anything human. It was tall, too tall, and its limbs stretched out unnaturally, long and thin, covered in tattered clothing that looked like it had been rotting for years. It moved toward me with slow, deliberate steps, its face hidden in the dark hood of a cloak that seemed to absorb the light around it. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My body was frozen in place, my gun heavy in my hand but useless. It was as if the very air itself was pressing me down, holding me there. The figure reached out, its hand, blackened and skeletal, extending toward me. "She's coming," it whispered. "She never leaves." The words sent a shiver down my spine, and for the first time in my career, I felt like a child again, helpless, vulnerable. My hand shook as I pointed my gun toward the figure, but before I could pull the trigger, a sharp, agonizing pain exploded in my chest. I gasped, stumbling back as the darkness seemed to swallow me whole. I could feel something cold, wet, dripping down my shirt. I looked down, horrified, to see a long, thin blade protruding from my chest, the handle slick with blood. My vision blurred, and the room tilted as I struggled to stay conscious. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "She's here. She's always been here." I fell to my knees, the world spinning around me, but I couldn't look away from the figure. Its face was now visible, and I couldn't tell if it was human or something else entirely. It had no eyes, just deep, empty sockets, and its mouth, so wide, so unnatural, stretched into a grin. And then it spoke, in a voice that cut through the darkness, clear as day. "Welcome home, officer." Couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get up and escape, but my body refused to cooperate. The pain in my chest was unbearable. I could feel the blood seeping through my uniform, pooling beneath me on the cold floor. The blade, it had been so quick, so precise. There was no way I should still be alive, but here I was, trapped in the grip of something far worse than any physical wound. I tried to focus, tried to move, but everything felt wrong. The room was spinning, and the shadows seemed to move, twitching and writhing as if alive, surrounding me, closing in. The figure, whatever it was, loomed closer, its presence suffocating, filling every corner of the room. The whispers had stopped, but the silence that followed was even more deafening. I looked up at the figure, my vision fading, but I could see the grin widening, its mouth stretching impossibly wide. It was smiling, or at least it appeared to be, but there was no warmth in it, no humanity, only malice. Its hollow eyes stared at me, unblinking, unfeeling. "You should have left," it said, its voice low and drawn out, like the wind through a crypt. "Now you belong to her." A chill swept through me, freezing me from the inside out. I knew what it meant. I didn't need to ask. It was clear now. The house, the man in the chair, the whispers, everything was part of it. And the figure, the one now standing mere feet away from me, was its messenger. The force behind it, the thing that kept this place alive, this place that no one should ever step foot in. I tried to speak, but all I could do was cough, a horrible, dry sound. Blood spilled from my mouth, and I could feel my life slipping away. But still, there was one question that gnawed at me. Who are you?" I managed to croak out. The figure tilted its head, the grin never fading. "I am not what you think," it answered, its voice echoing in my mind. "I am the forgotten, the one who was never meant to be seen. But she watches over all of this, and she waits for those who stumble into her domain. Like you." I didn't understand. But even as the words hit me, something deep inside me, something primal, understood all too well. It wasn't the figure that controlled this place. No, it was the one behind it. The one that watched, waited, and fed off the fear of those who dared to enter. She wasn't human. She wasn't anything that belonged to this world. Before I could process any further, I felt a hand, cold and trembling, on my shoulder once more. This time, it wasn't the figure. It was something different, something more familiar, something that felt like it belonged to me. I turned my head, and I saw her, a woman standing just beyond the figure. Her face was pale, almost translucent, her hair hanging in matted tangles. She was beautiful in a way that made my stomach churn. But her eyes, those eyes were empty, hollow, and black. She smiled. "Don't be afraid," she whispered, her voice melodic and soothing, but there was nothing comforting about it. "You're home now." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. And in that moment I knew I wasn't going to make it out. Not alive, at least. Why me? I rasped, my breath shallow, my vision fading. She stepped closer, her hand reaching down to touch my face. "Because you came when you weren't supposed to, and now you'll never leave." As her fingers brushed my skin, a cold wave of despair washed over me. My mind screamed for me to fight, to move, but my body betrayed me. The blood loss, the shock, everything had taken its toll. My vision blurred to nothing, the room spinning wildly. I heard the whispers again, but this time they weren't just voices, they were a chorus of thousands, all calling out to me. "Welcome home," "forever," and then nothing. I don't know how long I was gone, how much time passed between the darkness closing in and what happened next. Everything felt suspended, like I was floating in a cold, empty void. Couldn't move, couldn't feel my body. The world around me was nothing but shadows, swirling like a storm, and there was no escape. But then, a flicker. A single, sharp light pierced through the blackness. It was harsh, too bright. It hurt my eyes. I tried to blink, to focus, but the light wouldn't stop. It burned. And then, suddenly, I was there, back in the room. The same room, but it wasn't the same at all. The air was still cold, but now it was thick, alive with something terrible, something that could only exist in the darkest corners of this place. I couldn't see her, but I could feel her. The woman, the one who had smiled, the one who had made it clear that I was trapped. She was here. I could sense her presence, like a pressure in the air, crawling under my skin. I was no longer on the floor. I was standing, but I didn't remember getting up. I couldn't feel my legs beneath me, but somehow, I was upright. The blood should have made me weak, but I was strong. Too strong. Something had changed. I wasn't the same person anymore. I could hear the figure in the corner, whispering. The man with the hollow eyes had disappeared. The place was silent, except for the quiet humming sound coming from deep within the walls. Like a heartbeat, constant and rhythmic. Then I saw her, the woman who had once been so close. Her face was now inches away from mine, her black eyes locked onto mine. Her grin was wider than I remembered, stretched unnaturally, as if she were savoring something dark, something sweet. "You thought you could leave?" she whispered, her voice like ice scraping across glass. "No one ever leaves. Not from here." I tried to speak, but no words came out. The air was so thick, it felt like it was choking me, filling my lungs, and I gasped for breath. The more I fought, the stronger the pressure became. I could feel it pressing into my chest, pushing me down. And then, in that suffocating moment of terror, it happened. The lights overhead blinked once, then twice. For a brief second, I saw the world as it had been. I was back in Pine Ridge in the town I knew. My car was parked outside. The streets were empty. The sky was dark. I was alive. But when the lights flickered again, everything was different. The town, my town, was gone. There were no cars, no houses. Only endless, black nothingness. The town wasn't real. None of it was real. Pine Ridge, the police station, my life. It had all been a lie, a facade. I was trapped. I looked around, trying to comprehend what I was seeing, what was happening. But before I could even process it, the woman was there again, her hand on my arm, her fingers cold and sharp. "This is your new reality now," she whispered. "There's no going back." I tried to scream, but the sound was lost, swallowed by the void. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her face loomed closer. The last thing I saw was her smile, her terrible, empty smile. "You'll never escape," she said, her voice distant now, fading, as if her words were being swallowed by the dark. And then, just as I felt the last threads of my consciousness slip away, I knew. I wasn't meant to survive. I wasn't meant to leave. I was just another piece of the horror, another lost soul in this endless nightmare. I don't know how long it's been since I last felt time, since I last felt anything. Could have been days, weeks, or maybe even years. There's no telling in a place like this. A place where time doesn't exist, where reality bends and breaks, where your mind begins to crack under the weight of endless darkness. I'm still here, still trapped. I can hear her voice sometimes, soft and distant, just at the edge of my awareness. "You're not alone," she whispers. But I know I am. I am completely and utterly alone in this place. There's no escape. There's no way out. I used to believe that the worst thing that could happen to a cop was dying in the line of duty. I used to think that if I just did my job well enough, if I followed the rules and kept my head straight, I'd be fine. But I was wrong. The real horror doesn't come with the bullets or the chase. It comes when you lose everything, when the world you know shatters into pieces and you're left in the dark, with nothing but the echoes of your own terror. I've stopped trying to fight it. I've stopped trying to make sense of what's happening. The memories of who I was, of my life, my job, the people I knew, they're fading. They're slipping away like sand through my fingers. All that remains is this cold, suffocating emptiness, and the haunting presence of her. She visits me sometimes, standing in the shadows, just out of reach. I can never get a clear look at her face anymore. It's as if the darkness has started to consume her, too. But I can feel her eyes on me, always watching, always waiting. There's nothing left for me here. I'm not a cop anymore. I'm not even a man. I'm a part of this place now, a fragment of whatever curse holds me here. The others, the ones who came before me, the ones who walked through these doors and never left, are still here too. They don't speak, they don't move, but I can feel them. I can hear their whispers, their agonized murmurs in the dark. And that's the worst part. The silence is never complete. The whispers never stop. She told me that I'd never escape. I didn't believe her at first, but now I know. She's right. I am part of this now. My soul, my existence. It's all tangled up in the darkness, bound to this place, this nightmare. I can feel it in every inch of my being. It's inside me. It's never going to let me go. I don't know who will hear this. I don't know if anyone will even believe me. But if you find this message, if you hear my story, do not come looking for me. Don't step into the darkness. Don't make the same mistake I did. Because once you cross into this place, once you hear her voice, it's over. It's over for you too. And there's no coming back. Did you like these stories? Write in the comments. And please write what you didn't like. It will be useful for me to know your opinion. And I will improve my work. Thank you. Subscribe to my channel and click the bell so as not to miss new stories. I try for you.